Chapter 11, Members and Leaders. The objectives in this chapter will be looking at the different roles that people might play in groups and teams. We'll look at the skills of the effective team member. We'll talk about what groupthink and group polarization are and the dangers of each of those. And then we'll briefly describe some functions of leadership. Types of roles. We have from the text, we have task roles, we have group building or maintenance roles, and we have what the text calls individual roles. And let's look at each one of these three and what they include. A task role is any time that a member takes an action that helps the team focus on achieving the goal. You're moving the team along towards achieving that goal. They've given us some verbs: clarifying, evaluative, procedural, documentalist, initiating. So some ways that you might carry these out might be, you might say something like clarifying. So what we're saying is that this needs to be done. You're voicing a summation, perhaps, of what the group has talked about so far. As far as documenting, you would be performing a task role if you might say, well, I'm going to take some notes and send them out to everyone so that we know what we've accomplished. All of these suggestions I'm making, these contribute to helping the team focus on achieving the goal. You're moving the team in a direction that will be an end goal. If you're performing a group building or maintenance role, these are the actions you take to support the relationships within the group. And there are many ways you can do this. You might be a positive feedback giver. Hey, good idea, John. Or, Mary, what do you have to say about that? Okay, we've reached that conclusion. How about this one? How about Ben? What do you have to say about that? You're supporting the relationships in the group. You might perform being a mediator would be part of a group building or maintenance role. You might see two people who are starting to have some differences. You might step in and say, well, John, you've got a good point. Mary, you do too. Let's look at each one of those things. Anyone can play these group building or maintenance roles, but you're supporting the relationships in the group because you need to maintain cohesiveness in order to reach that goal. Now, the textbook calls calls counterproductive roles individual roles. And I think this is the name they've given, counterproductive roles. And I think what they're trying to show here is that when an individual acts only in their own best interests, it can be counterproductive to what the team is trying to achieve. So, according to the text, individual roles are counterproductive and hinder the team's cohesiveness and productivity. Some examples of this might be just having a negative attitude, putting every idea down, just being overall disagreeable, might be self-centered, might be taking the group's attention off of the task at hand, might be an unfocused person, might not want to contribute, might not want to listen to other people's ideas. Those are all roles and actions that can be counterproductive to the overall goal of the team. Now, here are some ideas on how to be a good team member, basically. Member participation. Here's some recommendations. Be team oriented. Realize that Every person brings strengths to the group. Keep any conflict on the issues. Now, in a work situation or a school situation, when we're working with other people, we don't always get to choose who we're going to work with. So we may not be working with our best friends. They may not be people that we would personally spend time with and hang out with. But we've got to be careful not to focus any conflict we have with them on personal issues and keep the conflict on the issues that are at hand within this team. Stay professional. Keep any conflict on the issues. The third one is to be critically open-minded. Now, it's important to be open-minded and to listen to other people because everyone does bring their own strengths. And be open-minded, but it's all right to, once we really fully understand what a person is putting forth, and recalling from chapter 4 and listening, this is an important part of listening, being truly open-minded while we are still striving to thoroughly understand where the other person is coming from. It's all right to be critical once we understand. We can question them. We can say, but how about this? That kind of thing. So do be critically open-minded. Avoid social loafing. This basically is distracting, a little bit of laziness, not wanting to focus on the task, taking the group off of the task at hand. Striving for understanding really goes back to being team-oriented and being critically open-minded. And the final point is to beware of groupthink. Groupthink is something you do not want to see happening. What is groupthink? Well, groupthink is when a group comes to a premature agreement or decision without thoroughly airing all of each member's grievances, each member's issues with that agreement. A lot of times this is driven by a desire to go along to get along, or wanting to just get it over with. Here are some ways to avoid groupthink. Here are some ways to combat groupthink, because you want your team to come up with the very best solution. A lot of things might be hinging on the decisions that you make. So you don't want to be afraid to play the devil's advocate. If you've got an inkling that some questions weren't asked or some issues still need to be raised and this may not be the best solution, you might need some more discussion, play the devil's advocate. Point out the holes in the easy solution. This is why groupthink is so common, because so many people are somewhat afraid to be the rebel. But depending on how much hinges on your decision, this can be monumental. Look up the Challenger 7 accident in 1986, and you'll find quite a bit of information on the role that groupthink played in that devastating tragedy. So you want to be pointing out the holes in the easy solution. You, as each member, wants to feel that they can question and bring up any issues that are still bothering them about the decision that's been made. You might ask for a vote. You might ask each person to describe how they agree with the solution or what issue they might have with it. Okay, so that's groupthink. Now, group polarization is a little bit different. Group polarization is the concept that we as human beings tend to make more radical decisions and take more radical actions when we're with other people. In other words, when we're within a group of people, we might act differently than we would as individuals. Now, this, I suppose, could be a productive thing, but so often it is not a productive way of dealing with issues. Say, for instance, people are dissatisfied with something. If they get together, they might decide to riot, whereas you as an individual would not do something like that. So you have to be careful and just be aware that group polarization does exist. I have found that the most effective team members can take on different roles as they are needed. You're going to be part of a number of teams during your life, as I have, that they're formed with no designated legitimate titles within the group. In other words, the team or the group is put together for a purpose, and there is no leader named, there is no specific person to take different roles. But the team still needs to function, and it still needs to achieve its goal. So to be the most effective team member, it's important to be sensitive to what's needed at any particular time. It might be facilitation. Even though you have no designated leader per se, you might want to facilitate and say, hey, let's maybe talk about these 3 issues during this meeting. Now, you have to be careful here, because if you take too much of a bossy attitude when there's no designated leader, that can alienate some of the members. So you have to realize that different roles are needed at different times, and it's a sensitivity thing. You need to be sensitive to those roles. Let's look at leadership. We're just going to touch on leadership. We don't talk a lot about leadership in this class, but I do want to draw your attention to 2 types of leadership styles. One is the influential style of leadership. Now, this is the type of leader who acts as an example. They take their legitimate title seriously. They want to be a person you look up to. They want to be someone whose judgment is valued, and they act as an example. To be an empowering leader, you share power. You're fine with sharing power. You want to give people an opportunity to learn, an opportunity to feel that they have some say in their own lives. This can be a very motivating factor for people. Now, the most effective leaders tend to use some of each of these styles. Some functions of leadership, whether you're a legitimate leader or you just decide that in some particular situation you might need to temporarily take the lead. You might facilitate the agenda, keep the work moving. You might be in a meeting and see that they're kind of losing interest. People are losing interest, or you think, hey, okay, we've got 15 minutes. Let's get back on track here. And it's okay to do that. Say things like that. Promote interaction, involve all. You might see someone who isn't contributing or is feeling left out. You might want to say, hey, Jamie, what do you think of that? Empowering members, delegate, raise self-esteem, encourage them when necessary, act as a resource, manage conflict, and always stay upbeat and positive.